Try again. Jayanilo Premadana Karuna Prachur Yanilo Premadana Heno Prabhu Kota Gela Chayataku Kota Gela Chayataku Kahamora Swarup Rupa Kaha Sanatan Kaha Dasa Raghunatha Patita Pavan Kaha Mora Bhatta Juga Kaha Kaviraj Eka Kale Kota Gela Goranataraj Pashane Kutibo Mata Anale Pashibo Kibo Mata Goranga Gunera Nidhi Kota Gele Pabo Se Samba Sangira Sange Jai Koilo Bilas Se Sangana Paya Kande Narotamada Jayanilo Premadana Karuna Prachur Aheno Prabhu Kota Kela Achayataku Jaya Vaishnav Thakur, Jaya Vaishnav Thakur, Vaishnav Thakur, Jaya Vaishnav Thakur. He who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Srinivasacharya gone? Where are my Sarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishnadas Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against a rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. So, just as a preface, I was there in LA when Jayananda departed in 1977, on May 1st, 1977. And the amazing thing is that I think his appearance day is also very close to this time. Because I distinctly remember, those of you who have been to the LA temple, there's a parking lot on the corner there where the devotees. And at that time, there weren't as many cars in there. And Jayananda was definitely his appearance day. It wasn't a disappearance day. They didn't know about that yet. And so, but it was right around this time. I remember maybe the next day was, or maybe, it definitely wasn't after Nishinga's appearance day. Maybe it was a couple of days before Nishinga days. Anyway, they brought him out. He was in this wheelchair. You know, he wasn't well. And we all came and sang him, happy birthday, whatever, and glorified him. And then next day, a few days later, we heard that he departed. And I think it's told here. He was listening to Prabhupada. He had Prabhupada chanting in his ear. The devotees were all around him chanting. It was very auspicious. And he had, he was the moving force behind the LA Rath Yatra. This will probably be told here, but Ramaswamy was very reluctant to do it, because it was a big expense. There was no idea definitely how to recoup the money. Now we have the site, with all of the things you sell, the prasadam and everything, you make money on it. But in those days, the first Rath Yatras, they were all in San Francisco. That was the only temple in the whole world that was doing a Rath Yatra. And that's why in 1970, devotees came from all over the world to attend that Rath Yatra. Prabhupada was going to be there, the one in Golden Gate Park. It's in the... following Srila Prabhupada. It's amazing. It had thousands of hippies following it, the devotees in the park. And that was it, every year in LA, in San Francisco. So to hold it in another city was revolutionary. And Ramaswamy was very reluctant to do it. He was in charge of everything there. So Jayananda came, and he was secretly calling up and making arrangements for, getting the wood and all this and the firing and calling devotees to come to LA in order to be in the Rath Yatra. So finally, because of all of that, and Jayananda, because of who he was, Ramaswamy agreed, and the whole temple was mobilized. And I went over to the warehouse. I was painting signs and everything. It was amazing. And that was the first Rath Yatra. Jayananda didn't see it. He passed well before it, but he was definitely the moving force of that Rath Yatra and so many others. So I'm going to read this wonderful remembrance of Jayananda Prabhu by Kalakanta Prabhu. Many of you know him. He's in charge of that Gainesville preaching center for many, many years. He visited here recently because he came to the West Coast to try to get something going in LA, in UCLA, as they did in Gainesville for many, many years. The prasadam distribution, I think they're still in a legal battle over that. So here's this remembrance called The Life of Jayananda Prabhu. There's not much about his childhood, but there is some little introduction here. After the disappearance of Jayananda Das on May 1st, 1977, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada instructed devotees all over the world to commemorate the event every year as they would any great Vaishnav's disappearance day. And he was the only one who got on the calendar like that. Therefore, we respectfully submit these pages to all devotees and friends of ISKCON as a means to remember and understand more about Jayananda's devotional service. Of course, we will see how he joined ISKCON and how he left this mortal world. More importantly, we shall see the astounding qualities he possessed by a true devotee. Sincere disciple, and genuine servant of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, subtitled, Jayananda's Beginnings in Krishna Consciousness. And there's a little picture here. Anyone who wants this, the PDF file, I can send it to you. There's a nice picture of Jayananda, one of the first visits. He's in a suit and tie, and Prabhupada is sitting on the Vyasasana next to him. So it describes, Jayananda was the all-American boy. Handsome, strong, intelligent, born in a more than middle-class family, Jayananda, Jim Kaur, took a degree in mechanical engineering from Ohio State University. With a background like that, it is surprising that Jayananda ended up as a cab driver in San Francisco. Karunda once asked him why he didn't get a better paying job, and he answered, "I didn't fit in with the upper class crowd," he said. Okay. Always introspective in nature, Jayananda felt empty and unsatisfied within himself during his college years. He would often say that he was never, quote, never happy before joining Krishna consciousness. His depression was almost suicidal when in 1967 he read a small article in a San Francisco paper about an Indian Swami who had come to the Bay Area to propagate the chanting of the names of God. Jayananda recalled feeling, a quote, a ray of hope when he read that article. Thinking the Swami may have something to offer, Jayananda made up his mind to attend the Swami's lectures. Srila Prabhupada's early lectures in the Bay Area were mostly attended by hippies, and Jayananda was one of the only straight people there. Jayananda later recalled that, "I wasn't much of a religionist, but I was attracted to Srila Prabhupada." Close quote. He was especially fond of attending the early morning lectures because at that hour, most of the hippies would be in bed. On some occasions, Jayananda would be the only guest listening to Srila Prabhupada speak from the Bhagavatam. You can just imagine that wonderful scene. Srila Prabhupada was always fond of Jayananda, and sometimes he would invite his budding disciple to take prasadam with him in his room. Quote, Srila Prabhupada would cook prasadam and serve me, Jayananda recalled. He didn't say anything, he just kept feeding me, and I kept eating. Jayananda soon donated his life savings of $5,000, which is a lot, in 1967. Multiply it by about probably 8 times or something. His life savings of $5,000 to Srila Prabhupada to help His Divine Grace print the Bhagavad Gita as it is. This was, let's see, 67. This was the first, this was the abridged version, the little blue one. I don't know if you've seen it. It was not the big one that we have now. This was the first Bhagavad Gita as it is. And it was called the Bhagavad Gita as it is. That was the official name. I'm trying to get that back, but I probably won't be able to. As more and more devotees joined ISKCON in the Bay Area, Jayananda continued to work as a cab driver and supported the temple by contributing all of his earnings. Then the next title is Jayananda's Attraction for the Process of Krishna Consciousness. Now there's a beautiful picture here of Jayananda offering flowers to Prabhupada. He looks like he's almost crying. Chandanacharya Prabhu remembers this special feature about Jayananda, attraction for Krishna consciousness. Quote, he was completely enamored by Krishna consciousness. Even when he'd go out on incense runs all by himself, he would rise every morning before 4, have a little Mangalarti, chant all his rounds, read and cook prasadam. He never deviated. He loved it. He was completely happy as long as he was practicing Krishna consciousness. Take prasadam, for example. Jayananda worshipped prasadam. When a little prasadam spilled on the floor, he would always bend down on all 4s and lick it up. He loved to cook, offer, distribute, and eat prasadam in a big way. He would always take prasadam with him and distribute it, whether he was making a boga run, buying bulk foods from the market, or taking a chanting party downtown. He would even say, prasadam, prasadam, in a special way that made you immediately want to take some. And it wasn't prasadam, it was prasadam. Prabhupada pronounced that, because in Bengal, the S, right, often becomes SH. Prasadam. And by the way, just a quick editorial note, you know, the official word is prasad, prasada, you know. But Prabhupada would always, when he would dictate it, would say prasadam. And so when I was revising the CC, not completely revising, but going through, and back in the, let's see, that was 30 years ago. Wow. I asked our Sanskrit man, Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, who is a very expert, and I said, can I make these all prasadam? Because Prabhupada would always say prasadam, and the original transcript says prasadam. And he said, sure, you know. So you'll find in the books that I got to revise, it's always prasadam. Jayananda would bring him a plate of prasadam so big, Jambavan, so big that Jambavan thought he could never eat it all. When he finally did finish the plate, Jayananda immediately put an identical plate down before him. I can't eat that, said Jambavan. And Jayananda would answer, Srila Prabhupada said we should eat till we waddle like a duck, said Jayananda. Jambavan would finish the second plate. That was ISKCON in those days. Of course, Jayananda himself could be found honoring large quantities of prasadam any time, day or night. He was the kind of devotee who would come up to you at 10 o'clock at night with some peanut butter halva and say, "Hey, Prabhu, come here, check this out." Another example of his attachment to Krishna consciousness is Jayananda's love for kirtan. Jayananda was always eager to take the whole temple out on Harinam chanting parties. He had a special attraction for chanting in the streets. Whether kirtan was held in the temple or in the street, Jayananda could always be seen dancing and chanting enthusiastically. When he was making Maharaj Das into a devotee, Jayananda would visit his house and have big kirtans. Even if there were only 2 of them, they would jump and chant, "Nittai Gaur Hari Bol." Also, Kurandar recalls how one day, after working very hard for 10 hours straight, Jayananda suddenly announced, and by the way, he describes it, he was always the one who was fixing the cars, taking out the garbage, washing the pots, doing all the things that we always have to try to find someone to do. Very practical. So he's worked hard for 10 hours. Jayananda suddenly announced, "Hey, it's 10 to 7. Let's go to Artik." Everyone else was so tired that Artik was the last thing on their minds. But Jayananda quickly jumped into the shower and then bounced down to the temple room for Artik. Of all the processes of Krishna consciousness, Jayananda was most attached to preaching. Whether it was during the Sunday feast, while making incense runs, or while building Rathayatra carts, Jayananda was always trying to find some person with whom he could share his ecstasy in Krishna consciousness. His preaching was very simple and easy to listen to. We just have to keep chanting and have faith in the name. Quote, "We just have to chant and take prasadam. Srila Prabhupada is so kind to give us such a simple process." Kurandar remembers how Jayananda preached to him on his first day in the temple. Kurandar eventually became a GBC and the head of the LA temple when I was there. He had some very important roles to play in early ISKCON. As they worked together preparing a little garden for Srila Prabhupada at the old Los Angeles temple, Jayananda said, "You know, things don't always go just right in Krishna consciousness. You have to keep chanting." At the time, Kurandar couldn't imagine how anything could go wrong in Krishna service. Years later, however, as he found himself still remembering those words, Kurandar could appreciate the real potency of what Jayananda had said. So many things may come and go, just have faith in the name. Jayananda's preaching was very attractive for the non-devotees. Chandanacharya recalls seeing Jayananda engaged in preaching late one night. It was 11:30. And Jayananda was up fixing a broken-down Sankirtan van. As he lay on his back working under the van, he preached to 2 hippies who were standing nearby. All they could see of him was a pair of legs, but they stood by listening, completely absorbed, as Jayananda worked and preached away. As soon as he felt a person was at all ready, Jayananda would preach to him about chanting and about Srila Prabhupada. There was no protocol or strict etiquette, just sincere and confidential glorification of Krishna. True to his character, Jayananda was often seen preaching to guests from his wheelchair even during his last days in this world. Devotees who knew him could tell him from a distance exactly what he was saying. You just have to have faith in the name. Now, just a sidelight, when Jayananda, he found out about his, at least it became clear and publicly known, after the first New York Rathayatra. This is a historical event, 1976. Prabhupada was there. I couldn't go. I was in LA. I had no money to travel. And so Jayananda was there, and he went there and to build the carts. That was one of his main services for several months before. He's building the carts. First of all, they had to find out where to build them, because the building, they had a 55th Street temple, was it 56? Yeah. And right in Midtown Manhattan, 11, 12 stories high. I lived there for a year in 79, 80. And, it's New York. There's no free, open fields to build a cart or open, area. They couldn't go to, it was right near Central Park, but there's no question of building the carts there. So who do you think they got to donate the land or lend them the land to build the cart? Donald Trump? Yes. Who said that? Yeah, he knows. Donald Trump, believe it or not. He owns so much land, he's a builder, And there was a defunct subway station. And the land above that he had bought to build something, but he hadn't built anything. And it was a vacant lot. And they saw it, and they found out who owned it, and they probably gave him some prasadam. That's about the only, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But those are to his eternal credits. He's going to need them, let's put it that way. Donald Trump. Okay. So, let's see. So Jayananda's preaching was very, so anyway, this is the sidelight. So he built that cart, but then it was that after building that, because it's a tremendous strenuous thing, that he found out he had this leukemia. He had this, and I forget who saw him bending over, practically in pain, and he didn't want to advertise it at all, But then he came to the West Coast, and he wanted to try to do this Laetrile thing they had. I don't know if it's still around. It was kind of an unbonafide or unapproved treatment for cancer. But he couldn't do it in the U.S. He had to do it in Mexico. He went to Tijuana, right around the corner here. This was before. And I think it was Guna Maharaj would go visit him, and everything. He's in this. And so he came to his room one time. He wasn't there. What happened? Did he die? No. He was out in the courtyard reading Bhagavad Gita, giving Bhagavad Gita class to the other patients, And he was ready to keep doing that. But then at a certain point they stopped. They stopped him from doing it. No preaching, because the Catholics are there anyway. So they said, "Get me out of here. I'm done with it." And he just went to L.A. and he stopped all treatment. He surrendered there. And that's when I met him. I saw him there. So that's how much he was into preaching. It may be told in this, I forget. Okay, 11:30. Jayananda was up fixing the broken down Sankirtan van as he lay on his back, and he was preaching to the hippies. As soon as he felt the person was all ready, Jayananda would preach to him about chanting and about Srila Prabhupada. There was no protocol or etiquette, just sincere and confidential glorification of Krishna. True to his character, Jayananda was often seen preaching to guests from his wheelchair, even during his last days in this world. Devotees who knew him could tell from the distance what he's saying. You just have to have faith in the name. Jayananda's humility. Humility was certain Jayananda's most prominent quality. He treated everyone as his superior, even new devotees. Maharaj Das remembers that Jayananda was always asking his advice. "Hey, Bhakta Mike, what do you think of this?" Although his service was glorious, he never wanted any glory. He avoided praise like the plague. Devotees got to know that if they wanted to be around him, they better not praise Jayananda. Otherwise, he would simply leave. Once when he was with the Danavirs, someone came to Jayananda and began praising him. Jayananda just ignored it. Later he turned to Danavir and said, if you've been around this movement a few years, people naturally offer you some respect. Not that his service or qualities were so great, he just was around a few years. That was his humble thinking. If he ever spoke about himself at all, Jayananda would speak so humbly that, as Lochan Das recalls, it was difficult not to think of yourself as better than him. If you had any reason to be puffed up, Jayananda would bring it out in you. Feeling himself, close quote, feeling himself unworthy, he would step aside so that others could lead kirtan, give classes, do artik. Instead, he could be found fixing cars, unplugging toilets, washing dishes, pots, or taking out the trash. Once a new boy came to visit the San Francisco temple. He wanted to help. So Keshava Das sent him to the trash area where Jayananda was preparing the weekly trash run. Jayananda told the boy, "I'm the garbage man around here. For years I've been watching garbage men carry out trash, and now Krishna is giving me a chance to do this for him." The boy not only helped load the trash, but accompanied Jayananda to the garbage dump. Later that boy became a devotee, and he recalled thinking, "Wow, if the garbage men at the temple can be so blissful, just imagine what the rest of the devotees are like." Karundu recalls another example of Jayananda's humility. One day, before Rath Yatra, I spent the whole day running around with Jayananda. By the time we got back to the temple, it was midnight. The whole building was so crowded, because people had come in from all over the country for the Rath Yatra. The whole building was so crowded that we couldn't find any place to lie down. Finally, we found a room in one little storage closet. Finally, we found room in one storage closet. I was so tired that all I could do was throw my sleeping bag on the floor and lie down. Then I saw Jayananda walking out of the room. I asked him, "Where are you going?" He said he'd be right back. But I kept pressing him, and he finally explained that he had some rounds of japa to chant. He didn't want to keep me awake by chanting in our room, nor did he want me to feel bad because he was going out to do something else. He just wanted to slip away to some corner and fulfill his vow. I remember saying, "Sometimes it's not possible to finish all one's rounds because there's so much work to do." "That's okay, I'm not too tired." Jayananda replied. I was amazed not only by his consideration for me, but by his full submission to Srila Prabhupada. That's the end of his remembrance. Although perfectly qualified, Jayananda was reluctant to take a post as temple president or sannyasi. It was not that he wouldn't or couldn't do it. He would do whatever was asked of him. He was happiest just to be working under someone. In this way, he was the backbone of the Bay Area's ISKCON temple for years. Though frequently changing administrations, he would always faithfully serve the acting temple president. He was very special, and yet no one paid any special attention to him. That was just the way he liked things. Jayananda's service attitude. Jayananda was always ready to do whatever was necessary to push on Krishna consciousness. He was expert at everything: cooking, preaching, deity worship, public relations, sankirtan, selling incense, construction, and everything else it took to run a temple. He was a tireless worker. He would be the first one up in the morning and the last one to take rest at night. It was Jayananda who was always running out to get the flowers, Jayananda who was washing dishes and making sure the kitchen was clean, Jayananda who was often missing class while he was out doing some service, and Jayananda who was always encouraging others to go out and preach and setting the example himself. Whatever assignment he was given, he would always get done, even if he had to suffer personally for it. No matter how hard he was working, he would never stop for a nap during the day. He seemed to be inexhaustible. Jambavan Prabhu remembers that many times the San Francisco devotees would go out to Berkeley to distribute the leftover prasadam after a Sunday feast. First, Jayananda would be in the kitchen cleaning. Then someone would say, "Hey, how about this leftover prasadam?" Jayananda would say, "Okay, first let's get this kitchen cleaned." He would organize the cleanup crew and then work twice as hard as anybody. Then he would transfer the prasadam, load it and the devotees into the van, drive the van to Berkeley, organize the distribution of prasadam, and lead the kirtan while we distributed. In later years, when he was with the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party, Jayananda would help manage and sustain the traveling bus program and simultaneously do all-day Sankirtan day in and day out, side by side with the brahmacharis scarcely half his age. In spite of his advanced position and seniority, he never asked for any special treatment. Leading devotees would often describe him as the most advanced devotee in the movement. Jayananda's freedom from fault-finding. Those who knew Jayananda always noticed one remarkable quality about him. He could not criticize others. It was against his nature. Even if a devotee did something which warranted criticism, Jayananda would usually say nothing, or else something that made the mistake appear to be perfectly understandable. No matter who was giving class or leading kirtan, he would always appreciate it. He never spoke harsh words or chastised anybody. If one devotee was criticizing another within earshot of Jayananda, he would simply leave. Rather than criticize others, Jayananda would contribute nothing less than positive Krishna-conscious energy to any situation. Sometimes devotees would bring up their expansive aspirations for spreading Krishna consciousness. Jayananda would always encourage their ideas, however extraordinary. At the same time, he was not a fool. He could always pick the right man to do a particular duty. Because he knew how to encourage people, the temple leaders would always assign new men to work with Jayananda. He saw no distinction between a new devotee and an old devotee. Both were his superiors. He could quickly give a new man a sense of identity and feeling that he belonged in Krishna consciousness. A true Vaishnava, he was expert at fanning any little spark of Krishna consciousness into a big fire. Few would dispute the claim that Jayananda made more devotees and helped more pull through than anyone else in the movement. Next section is called Dear to Everyone. Like the 6 Goswamis, keep track of the time. Like the 6 Goswamis, Jayananda was dear to both the gentle and the ruffians. He was as much at home with the Italians at the produce market as with the brahmacharis in the temple. He would make friends on street Sankirtan, and they would often come up to him and say, "Hey, where have you been? Once a devotee was approached by a staggering drunk in San Francisco. The drunk looked at his robes and asked the devotee, "Hey, where's my old friend Jayananda?" Many devotees, including Dhanavir and Chandanacharya, had the experience of taking over Jayananda's old territory on incense selling runs, or boga runs. They would meet people who said such things as, "Where is that Janayananda?" Or, "That man, he's the nicest and most pure man I've ever met." One man told Chandanacharya, "Well, I don't know much about your philosophy, but if that Jayananda is into it, it must be all right." Once, near the Rath Yatra cart worksite, Jayananda invited Keshava to step inside a bar and meet some of his friends. They walked inside, and immediately some 25 faces looked up and smiled brightly. Someone said, "Oh, this must be your friend you were telling us about, the temple president." They presented the two devotees with a sack full of vegetarian groceries, which they had chipped in together to buy. Among the devotees, Jayananda was like a big brother, always compassionate and willing to listen to them. But devotees rarely burdened him with their problems. "When you were around Jayananda," said Karandar, "you had no problems." The devotees loved Jayananda and talked about him during long drives on traveling Sankirtan. He was dear to them because he had a sense of humor too. Jambavan recalls being awakened one night at midnight by Jayananda. "Wake up," said Jayananda. "I've got a benediction for you." He then pushed a big samosa into the sleepy Jambavan's mouth. Like Maharaj Yudhishthira, Jayananda's enemy was never born. Next section. Expert at engaging everyone. Jayananda was very eager to see everyone engaged in Krishna's service. He once wrote, "When I reflect on my consciousness, had I not had association with devotees and Srila Prabhupada, I shudder to imagine the nightmare I would be in. If we could become a little dedicated to distributing the mercy, so many could be saved so much suffering." Because of his genuine compassion, Krishna gave Jayananda the unique ability to make people want to serve Krishna, directly or indirectly. Whenever a new bhakta would come, Jayananda would make him feel that he was engaged in important work. He, Jayananda, was older, bigger, and stronger than just about anyone in the temple, and everyone was glad to be working under him. He was willing to let people do things their own way, without getting finicky about details, unless somebody's creativity interfered with practical necessity. New bhakta or old, everyone felt satisfied after a day's work with Jayananda. This was especially evident during Rath Yatra time. Jayananda would organize a crew of cynics, bloopers, uncooperative personalities, and non-devotees off the street to build the Rath carts. Although many of his men sat down for a smoke during breaks, he would get them to work 10, 12, or 14 hours a day. He was always glorifying others and working hard himself. In fact, he worked harder than anybody else. All those qualities made him very inspiring to work with. Moreover, there was something very personal about Jayananda that made everyone want to help him. Once he and Maharaj Das were struggling to load a heavy refrigerator on a truck. Two drunks were walking up the alley, and Jayananda said, "I'm going to give them a chance to do some devotional service." His enthusiasm for devotional service was usually contagious, and this was no exception. Those drunks were right in there helping, and the job was done in no time. Afterwards, as usual, Jayananda said to the drunks, "Now say Hare, now say Krishna, now say Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Jai Hare Bol." Thank you, fellas. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jayananda's frugality. Jayananda was well known as a transcendental miser. He hated to spend any of Srila Prabhupada's money. Personally, he had almost no possessions, even during his years as a householder. When he was on the road selling incense, he would sleep in the car or on a bench, or sometimes with his friends he'd make in various cities. Many of these friends, such as Maharaj Das and Jiva Das, later became devotees as a result of Jayananda's preaching. Jayananda would use his personal charm with people to get them to give everything free or at a discount for Krishna. Without spending huge sums of money, he would personally collect nearly all the boga, the flowers, the lumber, the paint, and everything else needed to put on Rath Yatra each year. One year, there were hundreds of devotees at the temple to feed just before the festival. I can imagine. That was the only Rath Yatra in San Francisco for many years. I can imagine as the movement grew in the U.S., everyone wanted to go to Rath Yatra. Jayananda went to see one of his famous friends at the produce market, Banana King Louis. He came back with 4 free truckloads of bananas and first-class pineapples. Coupled with some donated milk products, the devotees ate bananas, pineapples, and cream, as much as anyone could eat, all for free. Jayananda would get almost anything done for free, such as printing, advertising, and mimeographing for Rath Yatra publicity. What he couldn't get for free, he'd get at a discount. And when he paid, he'd get his money's worth. For example, after the festival would end, he'd rent a big truck with which to haul all the equipment back to the temple. Although the devotees would be exhausted after weeks of hard work, he'd insist that everyone come out and help pack things away, lest he have to keep the truck another day and pay another $50 rent. Although he was a senior devotee and could have had anything he wanted, he always dressed in old dhotis and work clothes, which he'd buy for $1 per set at the Salvation Army's thrift store. Jayananda, king of Rath Yatra. Jayananda was the backbone of the Bay Area Rath Yatra for years, and his experiences at each one are summarized in the 1977 Rath Yatra edition of Back to Godhead magazine. I remember that, putting that out. It was amazing. We didn't know what picture can we get put on the cover of this edition, you know. And so the day that we had to decide, this picture came in, the famous picture of him in the front of the first cart of the New York Rath Yatra. He's pulling the cart and he's very blissful. He's chanting and just perfect. It's on the cover. I can bring that edition in. I have all of these old BTGs at home. Behind the scenes, Jayananda was doing everything in preparation for each festival. He would beg food, flowers, and funds, buy materials and build the carts, advertise, arrange for permits, and organize the cooking and serving of prasadam. Although things always went right down to the wire, he would consistently succeed in fulfilling all his plans every year. After the festival, Jayananda personally brought a prasadam cake or pie to each and every person who had helped in some way or other. These are, of course, the non-devotees he's talking about here. Because of his efforts, the devotees in the Bay Area enjoy to this day an amazingly harmonious relationship with the city officials. In fact, the mayor at one year, he designated the Rath Yatra Day as a city holiday, or, you know, and it's to this day, it's not a, you know, day off or anything, but it's on the calendar. During the weeks before the festival, Jayananda would sleep at the site where the Ratha carts were under construction. He would rise every day at 4 without fail, even if that meant he was getting only 3 hours sleep or less. To keep his crew enlivened, he would cook fantastic prasadam on a tiny gas stove at the site. The preparations were always carefully offered, and each was filled with so much bhakti that the temple devotees would sometimes sneak down to the cart site just to get some. Jayananda regarded his final Rath Yatra, the 1976 festival in New York, to be his most successful. Here is how he described the event in a letter to Keshava Das. Somehow I got the good fortune to work on the New York Rath Yatra. It was such an auspicious opportunity. Prabhupada was coming. There was finally a first-class center in Manhattan, and somehow Toshan got an okay to use Fifth Avenue for the parade route. Jambavan was here, and he had a couple of other boys who worked very hard. I was praying that somehow we could just get the carts finished. Somehow, by Krishna's grace, it worked out. You wouldn't have believed some of the events. The night before the festival, Saturday at about 5 or 6 p.m., we were raising Balaram's dome, and it was at the top when a huge gust of wind caught it and blew the whole thing over. The framework was all busted, the tubing was twisted, etc. I didn't see how we could rectify the situation, as there was so much to do on the other 2 carts. But 2 devotees who are expert builders vowed that they would somehow get it back together. There's a whole story of this told by, oh God, I forgot his name now. The devotee in Ojai, who's he's been there for many, many years preaching. Oh God, my memory. And I was in Elatra, and he told this story. He volunteered to try to make it happen. And he himself was very good at building and so forth. And he mobilized some of the devotees from the temple. They got it, the scaffolding replaced, and they raised it so that there were 3 carts. Otherwise, it would have been 2 carts. Balaram's cart wouldn't have even come down Fifth Avenue. It's quite a story. I can try to get that for you. Somehow, because it worked out, you wouldn't have believed some of the events. The night before, okay, twist, I didn't see how, but two devotees who are expert builders vowed they'd somehow get it back together. I had some extra pipes, etc., and they worked all night, and by Krishna's grace, all three chariots were at 5th Avenue and 59th Street by 6:30 a.m. Sunday morning. That's where the parade began. There's no place like New York for Rath Yatra. The parade was tremendous, as was the scene in the park. Even when we pulled the carts back to the construction site, people would come out of the construction site, donated, loaned by Donald Trump. Hare Krishna. Even when we pulled the cars back to the construction site, people would come out of their apartments and bars and chant Hare Krishna. I guess that occasion was the perfection of my career in Krishna consciousness. Okay. I think there's only another page or two here. Jayananda's relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Jayananda said of Srila Prabhupada, I knew he didn't want to cheat me, so I wanted to work for him. In his dealings with Srila Prabhupada, Jayananda kept his usual low profile. He was generally off working on some project when Srila Prabhupada came to San Francisco. Their relationship was, therefore, as Karunda describes it, one of old friends or very economical. That is to say, Jayananda did not go in for long meetings with Srila Prabhupada, even when all the other temple leaders were doing so. By way of reciprocation, Srila Prabhupada would invariably call for Jayananda when he arrived in the temple. Sometimes he would have to make repeated requests, and when Jayananda was finally located, he would resist, saying, no, I can't go to see him. I'm too dirty. I'm too fallen. He'd work after festivals and let others see Srila Prabhupada. Thus, Jayananda's relationship with Prabhupada was always one of service. Service to Prabhupada was the core of Jayananda's life. Once Donabear asked him, how does one make spiritual advancement in Krishna consciousness? Jayananda answered, I don't know. I'm too busy working to think about it. Srila Prabhupada always appreciated Jayananda's sincere service. He wrote to Jayananda in December 1975, I was very happy to get your recent letter. I'm always thinking of you and praying to Krishna for your advancement in Krishna consciousness. Yes, I remember the old days in San Francisco. Krishna has been so kind upon me to have sent so many sincere disciples to help me push on this movement on behalf of my Guru Maharaj. You continue with your program there in San Francisco, always strictly keeping your principles, and Krishna will bless you with greater and greater realization of the importance of this movement. I am dependent upon you, my older disciples, to carry it on. I hope this meets you well. It's from 1975. Jayananda's final meeting with Srila Prabhupada took place in New York City at the 1976 Rath Yatra. When Prabhupada arrived at the airport, Jayananda drove the car to pick him up. Prabhupada was sitting in the back seat and asked, who is driving? The devotee said, this is Jayananda. Oh, I know Jayananda, said Prabhupada. He gave me $5,000 to print my Bhagavad Gita. Jayananda's fearlessness. Jayananda was not only big and powerful in body, he was strong with faith in Krishna. Therefore, nothing could frighten him. Once on San Francisco's Market Street, Jayananda was playing mridanga and leading a kirtan party when, down the street, an enormous man appeared. He was at least 7 feet tall and weighed perhaps 300 pounds. His unkempt beard and drunken appearance indicated that he was an old veteran living in the bars off his pension. As he approached the kirtan party, the temple's reserved Kshatriyas, Keshava Das and Guru Kripa Das, readied themselves for a fight. Sure enough, the monster marched up to Jayananda, turned and began to shout, "Stop that chanting!" Jayananda looked him straight in the eye and said firmly, "Just chant Hare Krishna. Just chant Hare Krishna." To everyone's amazement, the drunk simply turned and walked away without a scrap. The ultimate expression of Jayananda's fearlessness came at the end of his life, when he was diagnosed with leukemia and cancer of the lymph glands. He wrote from the hospital, "I was out of the hospital for a month going to the clinic, and now I'm back for a couple of weeks of intensive treatment. Actually, the whole thing was a real blessing, as it made me realize that death is right at hand. Somehow I need these potent reminders to help me advance in Krishna consciousness. For the time I was in the temple, I was appreciating Krishna consciousness so much more than ever before, so it's been a real blessing." Even in his last few months in the LA temple, Jayananda never succumbed to fear or self-pity. When his old friends would come to his room and see his withered form and ghostly appearance, they would find it hard to talk their way around his condition. What Jayananda communicated, on the other hand, was complete disinterest in the whole subject of his health. Instead, he was scheming how to put on Ratha Yatra in LA. I mentioned that earlier, making phone calls and everything. Sitting on the lawn in his wheelchair, looking like death personified, Jayananda could not stop thinking and talking about Ratha Yatra. Karandar remembers looking at him from his desk. Jayananda was there, the epitome of Krishna consciousness and fearlessness of death. Karandar thought it odd that he didn't feel any great pity or remorse for Jayananda. Then he could understand that if Jayananda was so Krishna conscious, how could anyone look at him and not also be Krishna conscious? Jayananda pushed on the Los Angeles Ratha Yatra until he was so weak that he could no longer pick up the phone and call old friends to ask for donations. Factually, he collected a large amount of Lakshmi and devised the various means by which the festival could take place. The festival managers will readily admit that without Jayananda's presence, the first Ratha Yatra festival in LA would not have taken place in 1977. Thus, he proved that by engaging in devotional service, one transcends even the fear of death. Conclusion. This is one paragraph left here. That Jayananda passed away while Srila Prabhupada was still on the planet is not insignificant. In this way, Srila Prabhupada was able to confirm to all of us that, quote, everyone should follow the example of Jayananda. Certainly those who knew Jayananda should take it upon themselves to preach about his qualities of humility, eagerness to serve, equanimity, and devotion to Krishna and Prabhupada. We offer our humble obeisances to all such devotees who understand these qualities and try to share them. We offer our humble obeisances unto His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and to Sri Srimad Jayananda Prabhu, the exemplary teacher of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. That's the end of it. Yeah, and what's not here is a letter Srila Prabhupada wrote to Jayananda after he disappeared. And that was published in Back to Godhead. Anyway, I don't have it here. But I remember the content. He started the letter out that, you know, I heard about your passing, you know, and I'm very sorry about it. And but actually, so then he said, if you were thinking of anything other than Krishna, then you went to the heavenly planets, you know. But then Prabhupada said, no, you know, you definitely gone back to Godhead. You know, it's a far out letter. And so that, and Prabhupada made the instruction, I think it's in that letter, that we should observe his disappearance day all over ISKCON. And it's the only devotee who has that, you know. And the official BBT calendar has his disappearance day on it. Of course, many devotees, they observe the disappearance of their own guru, like that. But Jayananda is the only one who's officially on the calendar, just like all the other saints that we worship. So, it's a little late. Sri Jayananda Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Is that Dhanavari?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Very nice.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Harimo.
Thank you.
Prabhu Vijay Krishna Prabhu moved here. I met him yesterday.
Who was it who came?
Vijay Prabhu moved here in ISV here. I met him. He had a table yesterday.
I don't think it's Vijay Krishna. I think it's Vijay.
No, Vijay Prabhu.
Yeah. I thought you said Vijay Krishna. Yeah, I knew he was. I thought he's coming down here tomorrow for his teeth. I think he's going to visit here. He called me anyway. That was his plan.
Oh, Haribo, yeah, thank you. I told him that we miss him. We need you in San Diego, but so anyway, I had his darshan. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
And if I may, Vijaya Krishna Das Prabhu always distribute books. Also distribute books.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. I thought she said Vijay Krishna. She did, yeah. And I said, wait a minute. I don't think so. Nice to hear from you, Vijay. Haribol.
The feeling is mutual, Dravida Prabhu. Wonderful glorification. in favor of Jayananda Prabhu.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
we have my old friend Kalakanta to thank for writing it many years ago.
Yes,
And by the way, I forgot to mention, if anyone's still listening, there's a book that Vyasaki wrote called Radha Damodar Vilas. It has 2 volumes. The second volume, I believe, is about Jayananda. The first is all about Vishnujan Swami. And so there's a lot more about Jayananda that he interviewed so many devotees. If you're interested, Hare Krishna.
Of course, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Haribol.